The moment Elias Rowe realized the door had already locked behind him, he knew two things. First, this was the cheapest room he had ever rented. Second, cheap rooms never came without a price. He stood still, one hand frozen around the handle of his travel case, listening to the soft hum of the station's life support system. The sound was steady, calm, safe. That alone made his chest loosen after weeks of sleeping in cargo bays and borrowed corners. Whatever waited inside this room, it had walls, gravity, and air that didn't smell like engine coolant. That was already a win. Elias had learned not to ask for more than survival. Station Virex drifted in silence beyond the thin walls, a massive ring of metal hanging at the edge of contested space. It was not famous. It was not beautiful. It was useful. Traders, refugees, smugglers, and diplomats all passed through its halls, and most of them were running from something. Elias was no different. He stepped forward. The apartment lights adjusted automatically, dimming to a warm glow that painted the room in soft bronze tones. The place was larger than expected. A shared living space, a narrow kitchen, 2 doors on the far side, and one small door closer to the entrance that was clearly meant for him. A real bed. A real floor. No exposed wiring. Elias exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders finally breaking. He smiled. Then someone cleared her throat. Elias turned. She stood near the kitchen counter, completely still, watching him like she had been there the whole time. Tall. Pale. Too pale. Her skin reflected the warm light instead of absorbing it, as if it belonged somewhere darker. Her eyes were not glowing, exactly, but they caught the light in a way human eyes did not. Calm. Focused. Old. "You must be the new tenant," she said. Her voice was smooth, careful, and perfectly controlled. Elias nodded because his mouth refused to do anything else. Before he could speak, a second voice came from behind him, far too close. "Oh good," it said cheerfully. "You're not screaming." Elias jumped and nearly dropped his case. He spun around to find another woman leaning against the wall near his room's door. She looked similar to the first, but where the first was still and precise, this one moved like she was constantly holding back laughter. Her smile showed teeth that were just a little too sharp to be comforting. "Relax," the second woman said. "If we wanted you dead, you wouldn't have unlocked the door yourself." Elias stared. This was the moment his brain finally caught up. Alien station. Shared housing. No species information in the listing. Of course. "Right," he said carefully. "So, you're not human." The first woman inclined her head slightly. "Correct." The second grinned wider. Very observant. Elias considered running. He considered screaming. He considered pretending this was a stress hallucination brought on by weeks of poor sleep and recycled air. None of those options seemed useful. "What species?" he asked. The first woman answered. "Noctyron." The word hit his memory like a warning alarm. Elias had hauled enough damaged tech and black box data across enough borders to recognize dangerous names. Noctyron were rare. Long-lived. Predatory. Not illegal. Not friendly either. Sometimes called vampires by humans who liked dramatic shortcuts. Elias swallowed. The listing said nothing about that. "Yes," the first woman replied. "That is intentional." "Discrimination filters," the second added. "People panic. Rent goes unpaid. Everyone is unhappy." Elias tightened his grip on his case. "Do you eat people?" The second woman laughed openly. The sound echoed through the room, light and amused. Straight to the point. "I like him." The first woman did not smile. "We consume biological fluids. Regulated. Legal. Ethical. We don't snack on roommates," the second added. "It's bad manners." Elias waited for his fear to spike. It didn't. Not fully. Something about their honesty, about the way they didn't circle him or loom closer, kept his instincts quiet. "Ground rules?" he asked. Now the first woman smiled, just slightly. "An excellent start." She introduced herself as Ceres. Her sister was called Vale. They had lived on Station Virex for almost 8 cycles. They worked night schedules. They preferred low light. They valued quiet. They did not invite guests without warning. Elias listened, nodding, storing details like a man who had learned survival depended on reading the room correctly. "My rules are simple," he said when it was his turn. "I pay rent on time. I keep to my space. I don't ask questions that could get me killed." Vale tilted her head. "Smart." "And," Elias added, meeting their eyes, "I don't panic easily. I've learned that fear wastes energy." That made Ceres look at him differently. He unpacked slowly, aware of their presence without feeling hunted. The apartment did not feel dangerous. It felt watched. Not aggressively. Carefully. Like he had stepped into a system that already existed, one that would either accept him or break him depending on how he behaved. Later that cycle, when station lights dimmed further and the artificial night settled in, Elias lay on his bed staring at the ceiling. He listened to the quiet movements beyond his door. Soft footsteps. Low voices. The gentle hum of appliances. He should have left. He knew that. Every warning sign he had ever learned was present. Unknown species. Predators. Power imbalance. But he also knew something else. He was tired of running. Station Virex was neutral ground. The Narctyran were bound by law and reputation. And Elias had survived worse than awkward roommates. He had survived collapsing trade routes, hostile custom zones, and pirates who smiled before pulling triggers. If this was the universe testing him again, he would not fail by fear alone. Somewhere beyond the walls, ships passed in silence. Wars brewed in distant systems. Humanity struggled to hold ground in a galaxy that rarely cared. And in a quiet apartment on an unimportant station, a human shared a home with 2 predators who underestimated him. Elias closed his eyes. Tomorrow, he would learn exactly what kind of monsters they were. And soon after, they would learn exactly what kind of human he was. Elias woke to the sound of laughter. It took him a moment to remember where he was. The bed was too comfortable. The air too clean. Then the memory returned all at once. The station, the apartment, the 2 Narctyran sisters who shared his living space. The laughter came again, light and sharp, followed by the soft clink of ceramic against metal. He checked the time. Station morning. Human morning, at least. For vampires, Narctyran, this was probably their evening. Elias sat up, rubbed his face, and told himself something important. If you live with predators, act like prey and you become prey. If you act like a person, sometimes they treat you like one. He opened his door. The common area lights were dimmed low, tinted toward deep amber. Ceres sat at the table with a thin data slate in front of her, posture straight, expression focused. Vale was upside down on the couch, legs hanging over the backrest, scrolling through something on her wrist display while sipping from a dark container. "Morning," Elias said. Vale twisted her head to look at him. "It is absolutely not morning." "For me it is." "Then good morning, fragile daylight creature," Vale said brightly. Ceres glanced up. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes," Elias answered honestly. "Which feels suspicious." Ceres accepted that with a nod. Vale rolled off the couch and landed lightly on her feet, moving closer with open curiosity. "You don't smell afraid today," Vale said. Elias blinked. "I don't know how to respond to that." "Compliment," Vale said. "Definitely a compliment." Elias went to the small kitchen alcove and began making coffee. He moved slowly, deliberately, as if normal routine itself were a declaration. Humans survived by building habits, by insisting on small, steady things even when the universe went strange. "Can I ask a question?" he said. Ceres nodded. "You may ask several." "Why rent to a human?" Vale answered immediately. "Because the algorithm said you were optimal." Elias frowned. "That's not an answer." "It is," Ceres said calmly. "Just not one you like." She stood and joined him by the counter, keeping a respectful distance. Up close, Elias could see details he had missed before, fine lines near her eyes that suggested age far beyond appearance, subtle patterns beneath her skin that shifted slightly with the light. Humans adapt quickly, Ceres continued. You accept uncertainty. You survive with limited information. That is rare. Vale grinned. Also, most species scream and run. Elias snorted before he could stop himself. Vale laughed, delighted. See, she said. Already bonding. As days passed, routine settled in. Elias worked his trade routes during station daylight, buying damaged tech, restoring what he could, and reselling it to anyone desperate or clever enough to see value in second chances. Ceres left for her work in station oversight during the deep hours, returning with the quiet exhaustion of someone who spent her nights untangling disasters before they happened. Vale coded, hacked, and tinkered with systems Elias didn't fully understand, muttering to herself and occasionally celebrating like she had just won a war against an invisible enemy. They did not hunt him. They did not threaten him. They did not even watch him closely after the first few cycles. That worried Elias more than fear ever had. One night, station alarms rippled faintly through the walls. Not loud enough to panic the public, but enough to signal trouble. Elias paused mid-meal, fork hovering. Dockside disturbance, Ceres said, checking her slate. Sector 9. Vale sighed. Again. Again. Elias hesitated. Is that bad? For humans? Vale said. Usually. They exchanged a look. Something silent passed between them. Ceres turned to Elias. Remain inside. Lock your door. Elias frowned. You're leaving. Yes. Together. Elias set his fork down. You're not station security. You're analysts and programmers. Ceres met his gaze. We are Narration. Vale smiled, but this time there was no humor in it. And someone is being very stupid nearby. They were gone in seconds. Elias locked his door, heart pounding, and did what humans always did when told to stay still. He didn't. He pulled up public station feeds, scanning data channels with practiced ease. Elias had survived long enough to know that information was the only real weapon most people ever had. What he saw made his blood run cold. An unauthorized boarding. Armed non-aligned aliens. Hostages. And one detail that made everything worse. They were human. A small trade crew. Civilians. Elias didn't think. He acted. He opened a secure channel Vale had once left open on the apartment network, routing data fast and dirty. He flagged structural weaknesses, emergency override codes, vent access points, everything he had learned fixing broken systems for a living. When Vale answered, her expression shifted from surprise to sharp focus. You disobeyed, she said. People are going to die, Elias replied. Help me stop that. Ceres appeared beside Vale on the feed, eyes dark. Explain. Elias did. Quickly. Clearly. Without drama. When he finished, there was a pause. Then Vale smiled, slow and dangerous. Oh, I like him. Ceres nodded once. Proceed. What followed was not strength or claws or ancient predatory speed. It was coordination. Elias rerouted power flows to create false darkness. Vale collapsed hostile comms and fed them ghost signals. Ceres manipulated station response timing, delaying reinforcements just long enough to force the attackers into predictable mistakes. Humans were freed without a single fatality. When station security finally arrived, they found confusion, unconscious intruders, and no clear explanation. Elias sat on his bed afterward, hands shaking. The door opened softly. Ceres stood there, studying him. You acted without fear, she said. Elias exhaled. No. I acted despite it. Vale leaned against the frame. That's worse. Why? Elias asked. Because it means, Vale said quietly, you would do it again. Ceres inclined her head. Humans like you are dangerous. Elias met her gaze, steady now. So are monsters who choose not to be. The apartment was silent. Then Vale laughed, genuine and bright. Oh, we are absolutely keeping him. And somewhere in the station's unseen systems, records quietly updated. Human, Elias Rowe. Status, not prey. Assessment, potential ally. The galaxy had not noticed yet. But it would. After the dockside incident, the apartment changed. Not in ways that were obvious to cameras or station logs. The lights stayed dim. The schedules stayed strange. Vale still forgot where she put things and blamed the furniture. Ceres still returned from work with the quiet intensity of someone who carried too much responsibility. But Elias noticed the difference. They trusted him now. Trust, Elias had learned, was rarer than fear and far more dangerous. It started with access. Vale stopped locking her workstation when she stepped away. Ceres let Elias see fragments of her work, anomalies in trade traffic, patterns of movement near disputed borders, quiet warnings buried deep in station data that most species ignored. Elias didn't ask why. He simply listened, absorbed, and connected dots. Humans were good at that. They had to be. A week later, Elias returned from a salvage run to find Ceres standing very still in the common room, eyes fixed on a projection hovering in the air. Vale sat on the couch, uncharacteristically quiet. "What's wrong?" Elias asked. Ceres didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was controlled but tight. "The Coalition has issued a soft quarantine on human vessels." Elias froze. "That's not possible. They'd announce it." "They haven't," Vale said softly. "That's the point." Ceres expanded the projection. Elias saw shipping lanes dimmed in red. Human routes. Human trade hubs. Ports suddenly requiring extra inspections, longer delays, heavier fees. "They're squeezing," Elias said. "Yes," Ceres replied. Slowly. Quietly. Enough to weaken, not enough to provoke. Vale's fingers curled into the fabric of the couch. "They're afraid of you." Elias let out a bitter laugh. "We're barely holding half our systems." "That is why they are afraid," Ceres said. "Humans do not dominate by force. You adapt. You endure. And when pushed too far, you innovate in ways no algorithm predicts." Elias sat down heavily. "So what happens now?" Vale looked at him, eyes bright with something dangerous. "Now, you decide if you want to stay small." The plan did not start as rebellion. It started as efficiency. Elias knew trade. Not the official kind, the real kind. The unspoken agreements, the side channels, the routes that only existed because someone needed them badly enough. Humans had survived by building invisible networks long before they had fleets or weapons. Ceres had access to oversight data. Vale could move through systems like water through cracks. Together, they began to map pressure points. Human ships delayed. Vale rerouted compatible alien cargo through human crews instead. Inspection fees raised. Elias spread repair contracts that made human tech indispensable again. Quiet restrictions appeared, and quieter workarounds followed them. No laws were broken. No attacks were launched. The system simply adjusted. Within a month, Coalition analysts noticed something strange. Human trade volume had dropped, but human influence had not. Independent stations began favoring human crews. Repair times improved. Costs lowered. Reliability increased. Humans became necessary. That made the Coalition nervous. One night, Elias returned to the apartment to find an unfamiliar presence. A tall alien stood near the window, armored in diplomatic markings. His species was Coalition-aligned. Powerful. Ancient. Ceres stood beside him, posture rigid. "This is Envoy Threx," she said. He requested a private discussion. Threx turned, eyes like polished stone settling on Elias. "You are the human." "I am," Elias said calmly. "You are disrupting economic forecasts." Elias shrugged. "I fix broken things." Vale leaned against the wall, smiling faintly. Sometimes systems are broken. Threx's gaze sharpened. Humans are inefficient. Elias stepped forward. So were fire and wheels. Turns out inefficiency is just potential waiting for direction. Silence stretched. Threx studied him. You are aware the coalition could respond, harshly. Elias met his eyes. You could. But you won't. Why? Because you don't know how, Elias said simply. And because if you break us openly, everyone will see who you really are. Threx looked to Ceres. The Narctyrans shelter humans now. Ceres answered without hesitation. We shelter allies. The envoy said nothing more. He left soon after. When the door closed, Vale let out a breath she'd been holding. You realize that was dangerous. Elias nodded. Everything worth doing is. Days later, a signal rippled through human networks. Not official. Not broadcast. Just a shared understanding spreading through traders, engineers, medics, and pilots. Adapt. Share. Endure. Humans adjusted routes. Shared designs. Taught allies how to repair human tech faster than coalition replacements. Small acts multiplied. Quiet resistance grew. The galaxy did not see rebellion. It saw resilience. Ceres watched the data shift late one cycle and allowed herself a rare smile. They underestimated you. Vale grinned. Everyone does. Elias stared out the viewport at the stars. We've been underestimated our whole existence. And yet, Ceres said, here you are. The coalition began to back off. Soft restrictions loosened. Trade normalized, not because of mercy, but because pressure had failed. Humanity remained. And somewhere deep in station records, classifications were updated again. Humanity. Unpredictable. Threat level. Rising. Status. Do not corner. Elias returned home that night exhausted but alive. He shared a quiet meal with two beings who had once been monsters in stories. Now they were something else. Partners. The galaxy was learning a truth humanity had always known. You don't need claws to be dangerous. You just need time, cooperation, and the refusal to disappear. The first real mistake the coalition made was assuming the pressure phase had failed. From their perspective, the numbers stabilized. Human trade returned to tolerable margins. Stations stopped complaining. No fleets mobilized. No protests erupted. On paper, the problem had resolved itself. In reality, humanity had changed shape. Elias noticed it in the smallest details first. The way independent captains spoke more openly on shared channels. The way alien mechanics asked human engineers for advice instead of coalition-certified manuals. The way information moved faster now, skipping official routes and flowing through relationships instead. Humans did not push back. They spread. One night, Ceres returned home later than usual. Her movements were precise, but her stillness carried weight. Vale noticed immediately. Say it, Vale said, before I imagine something worse. Ceres placed her data slate on the table and projected the contents. Elias leaned forward. Coalition emergency session. Closed attendance. Threat reassessment. They are no longer pretending, Ceres said. Humanity has been reclassified. Elias scanned the text. His jaw tightened. As what? Catalysts, Vale read aloud. Not conquerors. Not victims. Catalysts. Vale laughed softly. That's almost flattering. It is also dangerous, Ceres replied. Catalysts are removed when reactions grow uncontrollable. The plan that followed was not Elias's idea. It came from a human medic on a border station who noticed coalition delays were causing deaths. It spread through human networks, refined by programmers, traders, and engineers. By the time Elias saw it, the plan already existed in pieces. He helped assemble it. Human ships began offering humanitarian aid openly. Medical supplies, repairs, evacuations. Always legal. Always documented. Always faster and cheaper than coalition response units. When coalition forces tried to intervene, they found themselves blocked by law, optics, and logistics. Denying aid made them villains. Accepting it made humans indispensable. Stations remembered who showed up when systems failed. Aliens remembered who stayed. The coalition escalated quietly. A human transport vanished near disputed space. No distress signal. No debris. Vale froze the feed mid-scroll. That ship wasn't armed. Ceres's voice was cold. It carried medical teams. Elias felt something settle in his chest. Not fear. Resolve. They crossed the line, he said. Yes, Ceres agreed. And now they will learn why humans draw lines at all. The response was not violent. It was visible. Human networks went public. Data releases showed delays, denials, reroutes. Every missing ship. Every stalled evacuation. Every moment where coalition procedure cost lives. Humans did not shout. They documented. Independent stations amplified the data. Alien species who had benefited from human aid spoke openly. Coalition denials fractured under weight of evidence. Protests didn't come from humans. They came from everyone else. The coalition convened again, this time openly. Envoy Threx returned, his posture less certain than before. You are destabilizing galactic order, he said. Elias met his gaze through the projection. No. We're showing it what it costs. You risk retaliation. We've been risking extinction since our first spaceflight, Elias replied. This isn't new for us. Vale leaned in. You don't win by crushing humans. You lose by proving you need to. Ceres added quietly, you underestimated how many species were waiting for an alternative. Silence followed. Then something unprecedented happened. A coalition-aligned world publicly withdrew support for enforcement actions against human vessels. Another followed. Then another. The coalition did not collapse. It adapted. Because even ancient powers learned when resistance stopped being manageable. The missing transport was quietly returned. Damaged, empty, but intact enough to send a message. Elias stood in the apartment, staring at the image, fists clenched. They think this fixes it, he said. It does, Ceres replied. For now. Vale smiled softly. And now they know something else. What's that? Elias asked. That humans don't disappear when pressured, Vale said. They connect. Elias sank into the couch, exhaustion finally claiming him. I didn't plan to matter. Ceres looked at him with something like respect. Most catalysts do not. Outside, Station Virex rotated calmly, unaware that history had tilted slightly within its walls. The galaxy was adjusting again. And this time, it was adjusting around humanity. The galaxy did not change all at once. That was the first lesson Elias learned when everything finally slowed down. There was no single announcement. No treaty signed under dramatic lighting. No celebration broadcast across the stars. Change came the way humans were used to. Quietly. Gradually. Permanently. Station Virex felt different now. Not safer. Not louder. Just aware. Elias noticed it in the way station officials spoke to human crews, with care instead of dismissal. In the way alien merchants waited an extra moment to hear human opinions. In the way data streams hesitated before filtering out human inputs. Humanity had stopped being background noise. They had become a variable no system could ignore. Elias stood by the viewport one cycle, watching ships depart in slow arcs of light. Ceres joined him, hands folded behind her back. You should leave, she said. Elias didn't look at her. That's a strange thing to say. You are now visible, Ceres continued. Humans who become visible do not remain small. Vale's voice drifted from the couch. She means powerful people will start wanting to own you. Elias smiled faintly. They already tried. And they will try again, Ceres said. With better masks. Elias turned to face her. Then I'll keep doing what humans do best. And what is that? Vale asked. Refuse to fit where we're told. The coalition's response came weeks later, subtle but undeniable. New trade frameworks appeared, ones that quietly integrated human systems instead of excluding them. Oversight committees added human consultants. Aid programs adopted human logistical models. The coalition did not apologize. They adapted. Because extinction-level mistakes had taught them something valuable. Humanity was not a problem to solve. It was a force to account for. Elias received messages from across known space. Traders asking for advice. Station admins requesting help building resilient networks. Medics thanking him for routes that saved lives they would never meet. He forwarded most of it. Humans did not hoard success. They shared it, broke it down, rebuilt it stronger. That was the mistake everyone else had made. They thought power was held. Humans treated it like fire, dangerous, useful, and meant to be passed on. One night, Vale sat beside him on the floor, legs crossed, staring at a projection of shifting trade maps. You know, she said, when you arrived, I thought you'd last maybe 3 cycles. Elias chuckled. That long? I was optimistic. Ceres watched them from the table. You have altered our lives. Elias grew serious. I didn't mean to. That does not matter, Ceres replied. Meaning rarely survives impact with reality. Vale leaned back on her hands. The Narctyran have existed for thousands of years. We survived by staying hidden. Quiet. Controlled. She looked at Elias. You survived by doing the opposite. Elias shrugged. We didn't have the option to hide. So we learned to cooperate. Ceres inclined her head. You taught us something. Elias blinked. Me? Yes, Ceres said. That restraint without compassion is just another form of fear. The words settled heavily. Weeks passed. Then months. Elias remained on Virex, not as a resident in need of shelter, but as a connector. A node. A human anchor point in a web that stretched farther every day. When problems arose, he didn't solve them alone. He connected the people who could. The galaxy learned a pattern. Where humans gathered, systems became flexible. Where humans helped, loyalty followed. Where humans were threatened, alliances formed. No war came. That frightened the coalition more than any fleet ever had. On the anniversary of Elias's arrival, Ceres placed a small object on the table. A data crystal. Old Narctyran design. What's this? Elias asked. A designation, Ceres said. In our culture, it is given only once. Vale smiled. It means one who changes the hunt. Elias laughed softly. I didn't hunt anyone. Ceres met his eyes. Exactly. Later that cycle, Elias stood alone in his room, packing a small bag. Not because he was leaving for good, but because humans never stopped moving. Vale leaned against the doorframe. You'll come back, she said. Yes. Good, she replied. I'd hate to break in a new human. Ceres stood behind her sister. Be careful. Elias slung the bag over his shoulder. That's not how humans work. He paused at the door, then turned back. When you first met me, he said, you saw prey. Vale tilted her head. No. We saw potential. Elias smiled. Then you saw correctly. He stepped into the corridor, blending into the endless movement of Station Virex. Somewhere beyond the station, humanity continued its quiet advance, not with weapons, not with domination, but with something far more dangerous. Connection. The galaxy would never fully understand humans, but it would never underestimate them again. Because humanity did not roar. It endured. And when the universe pushed too hard, humanity pushed back, together.